Stop for a second, because this is not just another message you casually listen to and move on from. There is a reason this moment feels different, even if you can't fully explain it yet. You've been going through a phase where things didn't quite come together the way you expected. You may have felt like you were doing everything right, putting in effort, staying patient, trying to trust the process, but still not seeing the kind of progress you thought you would. And over time, that can start to wear on you. It can make you question whether anything is really changing, or if you're just standing still while everything else moves forward. But what you couldn't see during that time is that you were not being delayed. You were being positioned. There is a difference between something being held back and something being prepared. And right now, you are beginning to move out of that preparation phase. The reason it felt slow, the reason things didn't fully align before, is because what is being arranged for you is not small. It's not something that could come together quickly or randomly. It required timing, alignment, and a level of readiness that had to be built step by step. And while you were focused on what wasn't happening, something much bigger was quietly forming around you. This is why this moment matters. Because when positioning turns into movement, it doesn't happen gradually the way you expect. It happens in a way that feels sudden, almost like everything shifts at once. And if you're not aware, if you're still thinking from the mindset of waiting, you might hesitate when things finally begin to open. But you're not being asked to wait anymore. You're being asked to recognize that something is about to change. And that change is connected to everything you've been through up until now. You've been in a season that didn't make sense while you were living through it. And that's what made it so difficult to stay grounded. At first, you believed things would come together quickly. You thought the effort you were putting in would lead to clear results, that the direction you were moving in would start to show visible progress. But instead, things slowed down. Opportunities didn't fully open. Plans didn't unfold the way you expected, and at times it felt like you were moving without any real confirmation that you were on the right path. That kind of experience doesn't just test your patience, it tests your belief in the process itself. There were moments where you questioned everything. You may have wondered if you missed something, if you took a wrong turn, or if what you were hoping for was even meant for you at all. And when those thoughts begin to repeat, they can quietly shift your mindset. You start to lower your expectations, not because you don't care, but because you're trying to protect yourself from disappointment. You begin to accept less movement, less clarity, less certainty, just to avoid the feeling of waiting for something that may not happen. But what you didn't realize is that this phase was never meant to give you visible confirmation. It was meant to develop something deeper within you, because while everything around you seemed uncertain, something within you was being strengthened. Your patience was being stretched beyond what felt comfortable. Your ability to stay consistent without immediate results was being tested, and your awareness was slowly shifting, even if you didn't notice it right away. You were learning how to stay grounded without needing constant reassurance. You were learning how to move forward even when things didn't make complete sense. And that kind of internal growth doesn't happen when everything is working perfectly. It happens in the moments where you feel like nothing is moving, but you keep going anyway. There may have also been times where you almost walked away completely. Times where you felt like it would be easier to stop trying, to stop expecting, to stop believing that something bigger was actually being prepared. That kind of exhaustion is real, and it comes from being in a place where you don't see the results of your effort. But even in those moments, something kept you from fully letting go. There was still a part of you that felt like this wasn't over, like something was still unfolding, even if you couldn't see it clearly. And that feeling wasn't random. It was there because you were still connected to what is being prepared for you. The truth is, this entire phase was about positioning, not progress in the way you expected. You were being moved into the right place mentally, emotionally, and even situationally for what is coming next. Certain things had to slow down so that other things could align. Certain paths had to close so that you wouldn't move in the wrong direction. And certain delays had to happen so that what eventually arrives would be stable, not temporary. Now, as you begin to look back at this period, you may start to see small details that didn't make sense before. Moments where something almost worked out but didn't. Situations where you were redirected without fully understanding why. Those were not setbacks, they were adjustments. Each one moving you slightly closer to where you needed to be, even if it didn't feel that way at the time. This is why this phase felt so long and so uncertain. Not because nothing was happening, but because everything was happening in a way that required patience instead of control. And now, as you move out of this season, you're beginning to understand that what felt like delay was actually preparation for something that couldn't have come together any other way. What you couldn't see during that entire phase was how much was actually being arranged beyond your awareness. And this is where the deeper truth begins to unfold. Because while you were focused on what wasn't working, what wasn't moving, and what didn't make sense, there were things quietly shifting that you were never meant to control. Not everything that is meant for you comes through direct action. Some things require alignment at a level that happens outside your view, in ways that don't reveal themselves until everything is ready. And that's exactly what has been happening in your life. There were situations connected to your path that were not ready before. Certain opportunities needed to develop further. Certain people needed to reach a point where they could meet you at the right level. And certain conditions needed to stabilize before they could support what is coming next. If things had moved earlier, it might have looked like progress on the surface, but it wouldn't have lasted. It would have created movement without foundation, and eventually you would have found yourself back in the same place, wondering why things didn't hold together. That's why everything had to be timed the way it was, even if it felt frustrating while you were in it. You may not have noticed it clearly, but there have been subtle shifts happening around you this entire time. Small changes in conversations, slight adjustments in direction, moments where something almost aligned but didn't fully happen yet. Those were not random or meaningless. They were part of a larger process, each one moving things closer to the point where everything could come together properly. And the reason it didn't fully happen in those moments is because something was still being prepared behind the scenes. Another important part of this process is how much you have changed without fully realizing it. The version of you that started this journey is not the same version standing here now. Your mindset has evolved, your awareness has deepened, and your ability to handle what comes next has grown stronger. You may not always recognize that growth because it happened gradually, but it is there. And that growth is not separate from what is being prepared for you. It is part of it. Because what is ahead of you requires a version of you that is ready to receive it, not just reach it. This is also why things remained unclear for so long. If you had seen everything too early, you might have tried to control the outcome, to rush the process, or to force something into place before it was fully ready. But what is being arranged for you cannot be forced. It requires precision. It requires everything to align at the right moment, not just for you, but for everything connected to it. And that kind of alignment cannot be rushed, even if it feels like it's taking too long. From your perspective, think about how many times you felt like something was about to happen, only for it to slow down again. Those moments were not false hope. They were signs that things were getting closer, even if they weren't fully ready yet. Each of those moments adjusted something, refined something, or moved something into place. And even though it didn't lead to immediate results, it was still part of the process that brought you here. Now you are reaching the point where all of that hidden alignment is about to become visible. The reason everything has felt so quiet is because it was building toward a moment that would not require explanation. When it finally begins to unfold, you won't have to question whether it's real or whether it will last. You will recognize it because of how clearly everything begins to connect. And that clarity is what separates what is temporary from what is truly meant for you. Now this is the moment where everything begins to transition from preparation into reality. And this is where you need to stay fully aware, because the shift will not happen the way you expect it to. After being in a phase where things felt slow, uncertain, or even completely still, your mind has adapted to that pace. You've become used to waiting, used to not seeing immediate results, used to holding back your expectations so you don't feel disappointed again. But what is about to happen does not match that pattern anymore. When something has been building for this long behind the scenes, it doesn't unfold slowly. It releases all at once. The same area of your life that once felt blocked will begin to open, not gradually, but in a way that feels immediate and undeniable. Situations that once gave you no clear direction will suddenly start making sense. Opportunities that didn't exist before will appear, and they may come in ways you didn't predict. And that's where many people hesitate, because when change comes after a long delay, it feels unfamiliar. You may question whether it's real, whether it will last, or whether you should act right away. That hesitation doesn't come from lack of ability. It comes from being conditioned by the waiting phase you've been in. But this is not the moment to fall back into overthinking. This shift is not random, and it is not temporary. It is the result of everything that has been aligning up to this point. And because of that, it requires a different response from you. Instead of observing and waiting, you are now being asked to recognize and respond. Because when something is finally ready to move, it doesn't stay open forever. It creates a window, a moment where action and awareness need to come together. You may also notice that this change doesn't stay limited to one area. When a major shift happens, it creates a ripple effect. When an opportunity leads to another, one decision opens multiple paths, and one moment of clarity changes how you see everything else. That's why it can feel overwhelming at first, because it's not just one thing changing, it's multiple things adjusting at the same time. But that intensity is part of the process. It's what happens when something that has been held back for so long finally begins to move forward. Another important thing to understand is that what appears now may not look exactly like what you imagined during the waiting phase. When you wait for something for a long time, you naturally create expectations around how it will happen. But what is being positioned for you is based on alignment, not expectation. It may come through a different path, a different opportunity, or a different form than what you originally pictured. And if you stay too focused on your original idea, you might overlook what is actually being placed in front of you. That's why staying present in this moment is so important. Because this shift is not just about something happening to you, it's about something happening through you. It's about your ability to recognize the opportunity, trust what is unfolding, and move with it instead of questioning it. The waiting phase built your patience, but this phase will test your readiness. And how you respond now will shape everything that follows. And now this is where everything begins to settle into a new kind of clarity. Not the kind that feels overwhelming, but the kind that feels certain. Because once the shift starts, and you begin to see movement where there was once stillness, your perspective naturally changes. You are no longer questioning whether something is happening. You are recognizing that it already is. And that recognition is what moves you fully out of the waiting phase and into the phase of receiving and responding. This is no longer about hoping things will align. It's about understanding that they already have. What you need to hold on to now is that this moment requires a different mindset than the one you carried before. The waiting phase trained you to be patient, to hold on, to trust without seeing. But this phase is asking you to act with awareness, because what is being placed in front of you now is not something distant or uncertain. It is something real, something present, something that requires your attention and your response. And your response matters, not in a pressured way, but in a way that reflects how ready you are to step into what has been prepared for you. At the same time, it's important to stay grounded. When things begin to change quickly, there can be a tendency to feel overwhelmed or to try to control every detail. But you don't need to control what is already aligned. The same process that positioned everything behind the scenes is still guiding what comes next. Your role is not to force outcomes, but to recognize them and move with them. Because when something is truly meant for you, it will not require confusion or constant questioning. It will come with a sense of clarity that allows you to move forward without hesitation. You may also start to notice how much you've grown through everything you've experienced. The version of you that struggled during the waiting phase is not the same version standing in this moment now. You have more awareness, more patience, and a stronger sense of direction than you did before. And that growth is exactly why you are ready for what is coming. Because sudden change requires stability within you, not just movement around you. And that stability has already been built. Even if you didn't fully recognize it at the time, there will also be moments where you look back and realize that if things had happened earlier, you would not have been ready to receive them in the same way. You might have approached them differently, made decisions that didn't fully align, or even overlooked their importance. But now, everything is arriving at a point where you can see it clearly, understand it, and move forward with it in a way that feels right. And that is why the timing had to be exactly what it was. So this is not the moment to go back into doubt or to question whether you are ready. This is the moment to trust that everything you've been through has led you here for a reason. What is ahead of you is not smaller than what you imagined. It is bigger, more aligned, and more stable than anything that could have come earlier. And now your only role is to stay aware, stay grounded, and move forward when the moment calls for it, because what you've been waiting for is no longer approaching. It has already begun.